We begin with Ukraine, and joining me now to discuss the latest is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. General Kimmitt, great to have you with us.
Sure.
Russia has now sent a formal diplomatic note to the United States warning that its arms shipments to Ukraine could yield, quote unquote, unpredictable consequences, citing the delivery of sensitive weapons to Ukraine. What might that response look like?
Well, I suspect that this administration has just ignored that note. It is a demarche. Demarches happen all the time in the State Department, whether it's complaining about another country not paying their diplomatic traffic tickets or other unnecessary things like that. It's pretty clear to me that this was meant to get into public domain so that the media would broadcast it to the United States, possibly worry American citizens, and try to get American public opinion against what we're doing to support the Ukrainians.
There's been a lot of discussion about nuclear weapons that Russia could use in this conflict. What are your thoughts there?
Look, I think that if Russia turns to weapons of mass destruction, they would probably use chemicals before they would be using nuclear weapons. They understand that if they use nuclear weapons, they're letting the genie out of the box. And even though it's within the Soviet doctrine to use these types of weapons, at this point, looking at Russian performance on the ground, the last thing they want is for NATO to enter into this conflict right now.
And General, Russia's loss over its Black Sea Fleet flagship, is that going to have strategic consequences?
Yeah, I do. I think the strategic consequences will be more for support for the operations inside of Ukraine. It's obviously going to be good news for the Ukrainians and bad news for the Russians when we can get through their iron wall of media control. Tactically, it's not going to have much of a consequence. Militarily, not at all. I think that the weapon shipment was, again, another public relation coup for both NATO and for the Ukrainians. And public support is an important factor in all of these operations. But the fact remains, it's a pretty small package, probably not enough to replace the combat losses that have been seen by the Ukrainians on the battlefield. But nonetheless, I think it's the right way to go. It shows that the West is still willing to support Ukraine in these operations.
And the French have said that they anticipate that the expected offensive is going to kick off in the next few days. Yet John Kirby at the Pentagon said that may take longer. What is your guess?
Well, I'm with Kirby on this one. These types of offensives leave a pretty big signature on the ground. We can see it. We can hear it through our ability to tap into their radio networks. We have people on the ground, Ukrainian intelligence, that is keeping an eye on all of this equipment as well. So if they're going to try to conduct a major offensive, that leaves some pretty obvious signals, obvious visuals that we can see through our intelligence platforms. And if John Kirby says he doesn't anticipate it anytime soon, I think he's given a very strong signal to not only to the public, but I hope to the Ukrainians as well, about the timing and location of any type of offensive.
And how would this offensive play out?
Well, I think that there are a lot of analysts that are thinking that it'll be a direct attack from the east to the west through the middle of the Donbass. That's number one. That will be very difficult because that terrain is pretty chopped up to start with. It's looks much like the trench lines of the First World War. They've been fighting in that area for 8 years. You can see the Russians trying to conduct operations in the north around the town of Izium that look like they made those signatures of large Russian tank movements, mechanized infantry movements, artillery preparations. We'll have a pretty good idea of where it's going to be coming from.
General Kimmitt, who is going to win this?
That's a very good question. We thought a month and a half ago that this would be a hands-down couple-of-day operation for the Russians. That has certainly proven not to be the case. I think it's a combination of the Ukrainian willingness to fight. You can see many, many years of NATO training within the Ukrainian formations. It's also the Western provision of supplies and specialized weapons to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have very much outperformed what any analyst would have thought, and any that tells you different, I think you need to go back and look at their records. But at the end of the day, the Russians outnumber them. Vladimir Putin certainly has a determination now to win. He has been humiliated by the losses of his military. He's put in a brand new general who is very, very brutal, who has a record from Syria that demonstrates he is unbounded by the rules of war. I think it's really going to come down to a battle of the wills between Zelensky and President Putin, and whoever is the one that is willing to take this battle of attrition for a longer period of time, he's going to be the winner. And anybody who can figure that out right now, I think, is a heck of a lot smarter than most of the analysts I'm listening to.
General Kimmitt, as always, great to have you with us. Thanks for that.
Thanks for having me.
Happy Easter.
And you as well.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.